Imagine for a moment, a man who possessed everything money could buy, but was slowly dying inside and out. Now imagine a humble woman, despised for her social condition, who carried in her hands a sacred gift capable of changing destinies. What would happen when these two worlds collided irreversibly? This is the story of how the greatest skeptic of miracles found his redemption through those he most despised. In the penthouse of a Manhattan skyscraper, at 52 years old, Robert Alexander Morrison had built a pharmaceutical empire worth billions. His companies dominated the oncology drug market, ironically the same medications he now needed to survive advanced pancreatic cancer. For 6 months, the world's best oncologists had given him at most 1 year to live. Robert had transformed this death sentence into fuel for his arrogance, treating employees like disposable objects and openly mocking any mention of faith or hope. For him, life was a cold equation of profits and losses, and his loss was mathematically calculated. 40 floors below, in the basement of the same building where Morrison Pharmaceuticals' headquarters operated, Maria Washington began her shift at 4 in the morning. At 43 years old, this black single mother carried much more than buckets and cleaning cloths. She carried the weight of supporting 3 children alone, the youngest with cerebral palsy. What few knew about Maria was that she possessed a prodigious memory for medicinal plants and healing herbs, knowledge inherited from her grandmother, a respected midwife in rural Alabama who had saved hundreds of lives with just her hands and unshakable faith. Maria kept this gift secret, using it discreetly to help colleagues with minor ailments, always refusing payment and asking only that they maintain secrecy. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, do it now so you don't miss incredible stories like this one that's just beginning. Cleaning supervisor Sandra Williams was everything Maria couldn't be: calculating, ambitious, and willing to step on anyone to climb in life. Daughter of a middle-class family that had lost everything in bad investments, Sandra saw in Maria a constant reminder of where she never wanted to be again. At 35, blonde and always impeccably dressed, she treated the cleaning staff like a cruel queen would treat her subjects, especially Maria, who by her natural kindness had become beloved among the building's employees. Sandra couldn't stand that someone so inferior received more affection and respect than she did. It was on a Tuesday morning, when Maria was cleaning the executive bathroom on the 40th floor, that destiny began to weave its plot. Robert Morrison had rushed out of a meeting, feeling the terrible waves of nausea that chemotherapy treatments provoked. He barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently, his body trembling with pain and weakness. Maria, who was in the adjacent stall organizing cleaning supplies, heard the moans of agony and, moved by her compassionate nature, knocked gently on the door asking if everything was okay. "Get out of here immediately," shouted Robert, his voice hoarse with hatred and humiliation. "How dare you bother me? You're nothing but an ignorant janitor." But when he opened the door, his legs failed and he collapsed on the marble floor, pale as death, cold sweat running down his face. Maria, without hesitation, knelt beside him, gently placed her hand on his burning forehead and murmured a quiet prayer, as her grandmother had taught her. For a few magical moments, Robert's pain visibly diminished, his breathing calmed and he was able to get up. Confused and angry with himself for showing weakness, he pushed Maria away and growled, "I don't need your pity. Keep your dirty hands away from me." Maria only bowed her head respectfully and whispered, "God bless you, sir," before silently returning to her work, her heart broken by so much bitterness. What she didn't see was Robert standing in the hallway a few minutes later, unconsciously touching the spot where she had placed her hand, feeling strangely relieved for the first time in months. Sandra, who had witnessed the entire scene through security cameras, felt blind fury consume her chest. How dare Maria touch the great Robert Morrison? How dare she enter a space that wasn't hers? Sandra saw there the perfect opportunity to get rid of that woman who bothered her so much and, at the same time, impress the company's CEO. She forged a detailed report accusing Maria of theft, claiming that several expensive items had disappeared from the offices she cleaned, including a Rolex watch valued at $50,000 that supposedly was on Robert's desk. The next day, Maria was called to the Human Resources office, where Sandra waited with a venomous smile on her lips and a folder full of forged evidence. "Maria Washington," Sandra began with theatrically solemn voice, "you are being accused of grand theft. We have evidence that you stole valuable objects from company offices, taking advantage of the trust we placed in you." Maria felt the world collapse around her. Her legs trembled and she had to lean on the chair to avoid falling. "I never stole anything in my life, Ms. Sandra. Please believe me. I need this job to take care of my children." But Sandra was just beginning her cruel performance. Furthermore, she continued, savoring each word like a predator would savor its prey, I heard that you had the audacity to touch Mr. Morrison yesterday, invading his privacy in a totally inappropriate way. This constitutes harassment and invasion of personal space. Maria tried to explain that she was only trying to help a suffering human being, but her words were cut off by Sandra's cold laughter. Do you really think a man of his importance would need help from someone like you? What arrogance! The situation worsened dramatically when Sandra presented the supposed evidence: blurred photos of Maria near executives' desks, false testimonies from colleagues who had been coerced or bribed, and even an edited video showing Maria leaving the building with something in her hands, actually just her own belongings, but the malicious editing suggested otherwise. I'll be generous, Sandra declared with false magnanimity. I'll give you one last chance. Sign this confession admitting your crimes, return everything you stole, and I'll consider not involving the police. Otherwise, you'll be arrested and your children will be left without a mother. Maria felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to sign a lie. I won't sign this because I did nothing wrong. If you want to call the police, call them. God knows I'm innocent, and He will protect me. This response enraged Sandra even more, who immediately called security to escort Maria out of the building, announcing loudly for everyone to hear that she was a thief and was being fired for just cause. The public humiliation was devastating. Colleagues Maria considered friends looked away, others whispered among themselves, and some even looked at her with disgust and contempt. While Maria collected her few belongings from the locker room locker with hands shaking from nervousness and shame, she heard a younger employee crying softly in the next cubicle. It was Lisa, only 19 years old, who had started working at the company a few weeks ago and suffered from terrible migraines that prevented her from working properly. Oh God, this pain is going to kill me, the girl moaned. I can't take it anymore, I'll have to quit my job. Even in her own agony, Maria couldn't ignore others' suffering. She approached Lisa and with her voice choked but full of affection said, Honey, let me help you. Gently, she placed her hands on the young woman's head and murmured a prayer her grandmother used for headaches, gently pressing specific points while asking God to relieve the child's suffering. To Lisa's complete amazement, the pain that had tormented her for days completely disappeared in a matter of minutes. How did you do that? Asked Lisa, amazed. This is a miracle. It wasn't me, honey, Maria responded with genuine humility. It was God through my hands. My grandmother always said He uses the humblest to do His works. Lisa, who came from a Christian family and knew the power of prayer, immediately recognized something special in Maria. She hugged her tightly and promised, Miss Maria, I'm going to find out the truth about what they're doing to you. You're a person blessed by God, and He won't let this injustice pass. Give this video a like if you also believe that God uses simple people to do great things. In the days that followed, Maria faced the worst phase of her life. Without work and with her reputation destroyed, she couldn't find another job. Sandra had made sure to spread the story of the theft throughout the city's cleaning company network. With savings running out quickly and bills accumulating, Maria found herself forced to sell her few pieces of furniture to buy food and medicine for her special needs child. She spent entire nights on her knees, praying and asking God for strength to endure that trial, never losing faith despite the despair that grew each day. Meanwhile, Lisa began her personal investigation, determined to prove Maria's innocence. She noticed that Sandra had drastically changed her lifestyle in recent weeks. More expensive clothes, a new car, jewelry that was definitely beyond her salary's reach. More importantly, Lisa discovered that the famous Rolex watch that had supposedly been stolen had never existed on Robert Morrison's desk. She confirmed this through discreet conversations with other cleaning staff and even with Robert's executive secretary. Meanwhile, Robert Morrison was going through alarming physical deterioration. After the brief relief he had felt when Maria touched him, his condition had worsened dramatically. The doctors were perplexed. All treatments that had worked before lost effectiveness overnight. He felt as if a vital part of his life energy had been torn away, leaving him weaker and more desperate each passing day. No matter how much he tried to rationalize, he couldn't forget those few moments of peace he had experienced when that humble woman had placed her hand on his forehead. Robert's obsession with understanding what had happened that day grew so much that he began asking discreet questions about the janitor who had been fired for theft. When he learned she had been accused of stealing a watch he was certain he had never owned, a suspicion began to form in his mind. He called Sandra to his office for a private conversation, where she nervously repeated all the accusations. But Robert, who hadn't reached the top of the business world by chance, noticed obvious inconsistencies in her story. That's when Lisa made the most courageous decision of her young life. She knew she could lose her job, but couldn't live anymore with that injustice weighing on her conscience. She requested an urgent meeting with Robert Morrison, claiming to have important information about fraud in the company. When she was received in the luxurious office, she took a deep breath and began, "Mr. Morrison, I need to tell you the truth about Maria Washington." With a firm voice despite her nervousness, Lisa told everything. How Maria had cured her migraine with a simple touch, how the theft accusations were obviously false, how the watch had never existed, and how she had witnessed what really happened in the bathroom that day, Maria just trying to help someone who was suffering. "Mr. Morrison," she concluded with tears in her eyes, "that woman has a gift from God. She didn't steal anything from anyone. Actually, she tried to give you something that no money can buy, hope and healing." Robert remained silent for long minutes, processing that revelation. Something deep inside him recognized the truth in Lisa's words. He ordered a complete investigation of Sandra's financial records and discovered evidence of corruption and embezzlement that went far beyond Maria's case. But more important than that, he felt for the first time in decades a call from his conscience. That humble woman had been unjustly punished, and he, even if indirectly, had been part of that injustice. That same night, Robert Morrison did something he hadn't done in years. He personally left his penthouse apartment and went looking for Maria Washington. He found her in a small house in a poor neighborhood in Queens, a stark contrast to the world of luxury and privilege he knew. When Maria opened the door and saw him there, her first instinct was fear. Why would such a powerful man be at her humble home? Was it to humiliate her even more? "Mrs. Maria," Robert began, and for the first time in his adult life, his voice trembled with something like humility, "I need to ask your forgiveness. I discovered that you were the victim of a terrible injustice in my company, and I was blind and cruel to you when all you wanted was to help me." Maria, surprised by that completely different posture, invited him in, offering him simple coffee served in a cracked cup, but offered with the genuine generosity of someone who has very little but gives from the heart. While Robert told everything he had discovered about Sandra and repeatedly apologized, Maria just listened with compassion, without a trace of bitterness or resentment. "Mr. Robert," she said softly, "I hold no grudge against you. I know you're suffering a lot with your illness, and when we're in pain, sometimes we hurt other people without meaning to." These simple words full of forgiveness touched Robert more deeply than any sophisticated sermon he had ever heard. It was then that Maria did something extraordinary. She knelt beside the chair where Robert was sitting, gently placed her hands over his chest, exactly where the doctors had located the tumor, and began to pray with such pure and powerful faith that the air in the small room seemed to vibrate with divine energy. "Heavenly Father," she murmured, "this man needs your healing, not just in his body, but especially in his soul. Show him your infinite love, Lord. Use these humble hands to be an instrument of your will." Robert felt something indescribable happening in his body, a wave of healing warmth that began where Maria's hands touched and spread through every cell of his being. The constant pain that had tormented him for months simply disappeared, replaced by a deep peace he had never experienced. But even more impressive was the transformation he felt in his heart, as if years of bitterness, cynicism, and hardness were being washed away by a force greater than he could comprehend. When Maria finished her prayer and opened her eyes, Robert was crying, not from pain or despair, but from overwhelming gratitude that left him speechless. He knew, without a shadow of doubt, that he had just witnessed a genuine miracle. How did you do this?" he asked, still in shock. "I never believed in miracles, never believed in God, but now." "It wasn't me, Mr. Robert," Maria replied with her characteristic humility. "It was Jesus through these hands. My grandmother always taught me that God chooses the small and despised by the world to confound the wise and powerful. You were healed because God has great purposes for your life. Now you need to decide what you're going to do with this second chance you received." Comment below, do you believe in miracles like this? Robert Morrison's transformation was so radical that even his doctors were perplexed. Tests performed the following week showed that the tumor had completely disappeared, without leaving any trace. Specialists spoke of spontaneous remission, a very rare medical phenomenon they couldn't explain scientifically. But Robert knew exactly what had happened, and this certainty changed not only his perspective on life, but the entire trajectory of his existence. His first action was to publicly fire Sandra, in front of all company employees, exposing her frauds and ensuring she was criminally prosecuted. More importantly, he made sure to completely clear Maria's name, sending recommendation letters to all companies in the city and ensuring everyone knew she had been the victim of a terrible injustice. He also established a generous compensation fund for Maria and her family, including complete medical treatment for her special needs child. But Robert didn't stop there. He offered Maria a completely new position in his company, not as a janitor, but as coordinator of a revolutionary integrative medicine program he was creating, combining conventional treatments with holistic and spiritual therapies. "Mrs. Maria," he said during the meeting where he formalized the proposal, "you have a gift that can help thousands of people. I want you to use this gift here, with all the structure and resources my company can offer." Maria was moved, but her response revealed the depth of her character. "Mr. Robert, I accept, but with one condition, that this program be free for poor people like me. God didn't give me this gift to get rich, but to serve those in need." Robert not only agreed, but decided to expand the idea, transforming half of his private clinics into free treatment centers for the needy population. The news of Robert Morrison's miraculous cure spread like wildfire through the media, but he made sure the focus was always on Maria and not on him. In interviews, he spoke openly about how a humble woman full of faith had transformed not only his body, but especially his soul. "I spent my whole life accumulating wealth and power," he declared in an emotional interview, "but I only discovered what really matters when a janitor showed me God's love." The integrative medicine program led by Maria became a phenomenal success, attracting patients from across the country and even from abroad. But Maria never lost her humility. She continued arriving early to work, treating everyone with the same affection and respect, and always giving all glory to God for each healing she witnessed. Robert, in turn, became one of the country's most active philanthropists, dedicating most of his fortune to social causes and public health programs. Lisa was promoted to Robert's personal assistant, becoming an important bridge between the corporate world and the spiritual program led by Maria. She often told friends, "I learned that sometimes the most powerful people are those the world considers insignificant. Miss Maria taught me that true greatness has nothing to do with money or social position." The relationship between Robert and Maria evolved into a deep and respectful friendship, based on mutual gratitude and shared faith. Robert found in Maria not only the person who saved his life, but also a spiritual teacher who taught him about compassion, humility, and true purpose. Maria, in turn, saw in Robert a living example of how God can transform even the most hardened heart. Maria's special needs child received the best medical treatment available and, although his condition couldn't be completely cured, his quality of life improved drastically. Robert became a father figure to Maria's 3 children, ensuring they had access to the best education and opportunities they could have never dreamed of. Years later, when Robert Morrison was asked by a journalist about what had been the most important moment of his life, he answered without hesitation, "It was when a humble janitor taught me that there are treasures infinitely more valuable than money. She gave me back not only my health, but my humanity. I learned that miracles happen every day, but we can only see them when we free ourselves from pride and arrogance." Maria Washington, who had begun this story as an invisible and despised woman, ended up being nationally recognized as an example of faith, kindness, and perseverance. But for her, the greatest reward wasn't the awards or public recognition, but seeing how God had used her obedience to transform so many people's lives, starting with a powerful man who had forgotten how to love and be loved. This story reminds us that in a world obsessed with power and material wealth, true miracles often come through the simplest and humblest people. It teaches us that divine justice may be slow, but always arrives, and that genuine goodness always finds a way to be rewarded. Most importantly, it shows us that true healing doesn't just happen in the body, but especially in the heart and soul, transforming not only those who receive, but also those who give. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles still happen and that God continues to use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that restore our faith in human goodness and the transforming power of divine love.